Hello and welcome to Rauta's Indie 5. This time once again 5 different smaller releases, and let's start going. First we'll start with Goatmoon, Hard Evidence Illegal Live Activities 2009. This is a live recording obviously, and it's a reissue of kind. More than 10 years of age. This album has been out there for multiple counts, so this is not exactly new release as such. Now it's more glossy looking digipack, and as you can see there are quite a few live tracks and one bonus track which is not mentioned here. Well, since it's a live album, it's pretty much obvious it's just live quality, lo-fi actually, very raw, Goatmoon, kind of a black metal, and well, if you are not kind of informed what this band is all about, well, you can pretty much Google it up. It's very politically active, very questionable content in even black metal terms. And this live recording, unfortunately, doesn't really justify the band's style, because obviously later on, especially, the band was so much more melodic. And with this kind of raw output, it's not really bringing the kind of a Goatmoon feeling there. Actually, the most, I think, rewarding in a way ingredient, if we can call them that, well, let's say somewhat more interesting thing on this album are actually the live spoken parts there, both by the band and the audience. But the funny thing is, obviously they are in Finnish, so unless you're a Finnish speaking person, you are totally clueless what they're talking about, and also you kind of miss who these people actually are. I can say there's some quite few known black metal scene names here heard, so it's kind of an inside joke in a way. And other than that, I don't know who to recommend this. I guess most people who are big Goatmoon fans already have this. If not, maybe it's your time to get it, but I cannot recommend this to anybody except Goatmoon fans, because, you know, the production is very, very lo-fi, it's very raw, and to be honest, it's not too shabby in other respects as well. So only for Goatmoon fanatics, others can pretty much skip that album. Then we have a little bit older release from Dutch band Israthoum. This is actually their, I think, third album, and they have actually a new album since that out already, but I'm just going through the older review pile stuff here, except for the Goatmoon, which was just released by the end of February 2020. But this one is about 3 years old. It's Dutch black metal in kind of interesting ways that it starts like it's like 1990s Immortal, doing its kind of a cold sounding, a little bit lo-fi, kind of a mushy sound kind of a thing, but very, very good feeling in the first beginning parts. And it's just like, okay, this is gonna fly like, I don't know, a hawk. But it turns out to be more like a chicken kind of a flight, because after a while the band starts exploring too much kind of a avant-garde-ish feelings, more experimental sort of black metal, and towards the end this album becomes like a slippery slope. It's like two different kind of bands are putting together their efforts, and unfortunately even the good parts are in the beginning, the last parts make this one rather just okay-ish album. Some good ideas, some very mediocre ones, so the overall result is pretty much like, well, somewhere between good and mediocre one. Icelandic black metal has been on the map for last few years, mostly because of its rather interesting third wave thing. And one of the not so good bands, unfortunately, especially with the first album one, is this band called Zakaz. This one is called, I don't actually know how to pronounce it, but it's a Myrkur or dauði. It's kind of a different breed of Icelandic black metal. It's kind of a combination of death metallic ideas, kind of a folk metal parts, and then kind of a Nordic black metal. To be honest, quite a bad hybrid. Now, the vocals are what reminds me more of death metal, because they're kind of a growly, a little bit distanced from the microphone. It seems like it's mixed on the background to create this kind of a ghastly feeling. But to be honest, it's weak growling. especially coming from a person, from a death metal perspective, it sounds like this is very, very weak in vocals. And when it comes to the sound, it's kind of mushy, it's kind of a weak, it's kind of like, well, to be honest, very demo material like. It seems like it's not really taken care of properly. Now, if those two could be, kind of a tolerable things if only the music was good. But it's not. In fact, I find it kind of like intolerable because sometimes it's like, yeah, these odd riffs are rather okay, but what is this folk melody thing doing here? And what is this semi-acoustic thing here with kind of a spoken, well, not spoken, but kind of a clean choir type vocals? And like, dudes, focus on something. Don't try to please everybody because you will fail. And this is what Zakaz doing. It's not a horrible album, but less than mediocre in my opinion. Garhelenth is a more exotic band than most of the stuff ever here on Rauta. And why is that? It's because the band is from Iran. Well, originally anyway, and then they have been relocating to other parts of the world. But here it is, a mini, well, not exactly mini CD, but mini CD-like full-length album. And why mini CD-like is that this is less than 30 minutes of an album here. Interesting band in the terms of being from the part of the world where metal music is not exactly most allowed form of art. And this band has nevertheless been able to put out some black metal, which is kind of flirting with the very traditional style of black metal that is very kind of a Nordic style, but also some of the weirder riffs, which then again actually make this album more kind of unique. Now this is interesting by Satana Records, which I have previously mentioned. Some of the albums, they actually have the underneath print on CD as well, which makes this album very cool to look at. Kind of a vinyl looking on the background, on the foreground, and underneath it's more or less done with this information. Now, be it as it may, this album is kind of a combination of these Nordic kind of riffs. It's kind of dark, it's melodic, and it's kind of a traditional second wave black metal. But some of those ideas with the riffs are rather unique. And by unique, I mean you have certain patterns and melodic ideas which are not your typical black metal. They blend together quite well, in fact, and the overall production pretty much supports it. But there are two downsides on this album. First of all, it's done with drum machine, which is too sloppy, to be honest. And secondly, most of these songs, even with this kind of exotic element, it's not exactly good enough to convince you. I mean, this is more of a anecdotal kind of a band, like, hey, I heard this black metal band from Iran, can you imagine, rather than, wow, I gotta get this on my shelf. Now, this is no bad album by no means, but it's still more like a decent one rather than mind-blowing one. Be sure to check out. You will most likely never ever hear again another Iranese band, but then again, who knows. Last, and definitely not least, is this Swedish band from 1990s. Actually, from 1990, this band was then formed, and it's one of the, I guess, oldest Swedish death metal bands, which is still active. Now, there is a little but right there, because this band actually disbanded around 1995 after one full-length album and a few smaller ones, and then came back around 2014. So of this 5-man band, only one member is the original one, and the rest are, well, a lot newer. Christ of the Fallen is their band's 4th album, and very traditional Swedish death metal. Varying from a mid-tempo to a little bit faster parts. It's very much what you would expect from Sweden. It's kind of a sunlight sound, and that is because, I assume, Boss HM2 pedal, or one of those Boss pedals anyway, which is so kind of a thing in the Swedish death metal sound. However, this album, despite its good guitar sound, despite its strong vocals with Jonni Pettersson, the album is not that good. It's very much like the Garhelenth, they're right, being kind of decent. Like, every element is right there to make you a good album, but the overall result is more like, it's kind of, yeah, it's okay. So it's kind of decent. Not bad, not maybe even mediocre, because there's some nice elements, especially the sound and the vocals, but when you just go for the details of those songs, it's kind of a pretty obvious that this is not cold material. This is something like, yeah, I'll give it a go once or twice and then move on to better albums. Not bad, but from band of this age, I would have expected a lot more. Anyway, Wombbath is out there for you old school death metal fanatics, so be sure to check out and decide for yourself. This is all from Rauta or from Indie 5. See you soon next week with more stuff coming your way.